And we're now live. Apologies for the late start of the stream today. We had a few technical snafus, shall we say. So welcome everybody to our Chocolatey Software Product Spotlight live stream. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it's the first one for February. It's actually a first one for 2023 as well. And we're back with a review of a very special set of releases that have occurred in the last week to 2 weeks. So we run 2 live streams every month on the first and third Thursday. And this live stream is the Chocolatey Product Spotlight live stream, where we spotlight Chocolatey products, recent releases, and important features. We have another live stream, and that's on the third Thursday of each month. And that's our Chocolatey Community Coffee Break, where we talk about all things Chocolatey community, what's happening, how you can get involved, and talk to key community members as well. And the next community live stream is the 16th of February. You can watch out for our announcements of all the Chocolatey content that we have by following us, subscribing us on Discord, Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. We run all the things. And you can find those links for all of those at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. So scroll all the way down to the bottom and you'll see the icons there that you can follow us or subscribe. Today we'll be looking at our recent releases of Chocolatey CLI 2.0.0 Alpha 1 and Chocolatey GUI 1.1.1. My name is Paul Broadwith and I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolatey Software, and I lead the engineering team that's responsible for all the products we'll be talking about today. My co-host is Ewan Park, who will be taking us through the technical aspects today, including the demos. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, I can do that. So my name is Gary Park, as Paul said. I'm a senior software engineer here at Chocolatey Software Inc. And I've been doing this for a fair while now. So I shouldn't be a stranger to folks that are been following us along. But yeah, I'm excited to show you some of the stuff that we've got in the new alpha release of Chocolatey and the official release of Chocolatey GUI. Yeah. You're muted, mate.
This was going so well, Gary. Being all professional, we were a little bit late. Actually, it wasn't going so well. We were a little bit late in starting. But yeah, so yes, I was saying, but nobody could hear me. The Chocolatey CLI Alpha is the first pre-release version we've released in a very long time. I think the last one was 0.10.16. Gary, do you remember when that was? That was a beta, not an alpha, but do you remember when that was? It's 2000.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that far back. No.
Is it 2018? Anyway, it was a long time ago, whatever it was. But as with all pre-release software, you should read the release notes and known issues before you install. Please, please, please do that. It's really, really important. As Gary is going to demonstrate, you need to tell Chocolatey CLI to install a pre-release version of the software. It's not something it does without you knowing about it. You actually have to tell it to do that. And there is a reason for that. Pre-release software is not stable software, otherwise it would be called stable software. It has bugs, it has issues, and there's maybe things that are not working in there. Hence the reason why it's pre-release, and Chocolatey CLI Alpha is no exception to that. So we would not recommend that you install this in a production environment and that you take an export of all your packages and do a backup before you actually start to use it. Now, we're not saying that it's going to wreck everything, but you need to make sure that you are happy with that. It is alpha software, it's early release, and it does have bugs. We've put the known issues up on our docs repository or our docs site, but there'll be other issues that you as a normal user on your day-to-day use will come across that we haven't been able to test for or we won't know about. Some people kind of described alpha release software as prototype software, so kind of think about it like that. But having said all of that, Gary's now going to take us through the whiz-bang of how it all works and how awesome it is. And we're actually really, I know this is an alpha release, but we're actually really, really excited that this is leading us somewhere. This isn't just us releasing it for the sake of it. We are actually going somewhere with Nougat v3 implementation and also the uplifted .NET 4.8. So this is really important for us. It's really important for Chocolatey, and it's a path that we've been wanting to follow for some time. And it is actually exciting for the team that we're actually starting to walk down that path. So, Gary, I will turn over to you now.
So hopefully you can see my screen. So just to follow up on what Paul said there are some known issues with the Chocolatey CLI alpha. So on the release notes for the alpha, there is a note here that says, if you are finding any issues with the alpha, please go ahead and comment on this discussion that you can see linked here. And that link there will take you to this discussion, which is also where we're keeping an up-to-date list of any known issues that have come up. So there are some there already. Mainly they're around the installation of packages when there are dependencies in play. There's a bug in there that I haven't quite got to the bottom of yet, and it's to do with the uplift to the NuGet and the new NuGet client libraries. There's something in there that doesn't quite work the way that we want it to. So we're working through that and figuring that out. The other one that I did want to point out is that currently, if you attempt to do a Choco push, it will happily say that it pushed a package, but it didn't. Nothing happened. It says on the command line that it was successfully pushed. The reason I bring this up is because there was at least one community maintainer in Discord who brought that up to us. It is a very much a known issue that we have, I believe, we fixed that in the current development branch, and that will flow into the next alpha that we'll release at some point down the line. So, as Paul said, there are issues going into this. It's a big uplift. Not to put too fine a point on it, there's been a lot of work going into this. There's been a lot of work going into this from some of our community members as well. So we appreciate all the help that they've offered, especially the Cake is a Lie. He's put in a huge amount of effort going into this to help us to get to where we are today. So we very much appreciate all of his work. So where are we? So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop talking about the Chocolatey CLI alpha there just for a little bit, because anyone who knows me knows that I prefer Chocolatey GUI, mainly because I did a lot of the work on Chocolatey GUI. So we're going to talk about that one first, because it's more important than Chocolatey CLI, and then we'll come back to it, right? So what we did in doing the work of the uplift of Chocolatey CLI to get to that alpha stage, that we obviously need to update all of the other Chocolatey components. So those are Chocolatey licensed, Chocolatey agent, Chocolatey GUI, and Chocolatey GUI licensed. So as we were doing the uplift to Chocolatey GUI for the new version, we found that there was at least a couple of bugs in there that we thought we needed to address before we go into the next alpha version of Chocolatey GUI. So that's what's here in the release notes here. So we have released a 1.1.1 version of Chocolatey GUI, and there was 2 bug fixes. And what I wanted to show was the symptom for the first one. So if I go ahead here and try and run Chocolatey GUI, what you'll see, or actually I should do this first as well. So while that's loading, if I run Choco here, on this machine, I have Chocolatey for Business installed. And with that, I've also installed the Chocolatey GUI license extension. But if I load up Chocolatey GUI, which is now hiding behind here, to the untrained eye, Chocolatey GUI is working. To the more trained eye, the Chocolatey GUI license extension hasn't actually been loaded when it should have. And the reason I can say that is because down here on the left-hand side here, it's just saying Chocolatey GUI version 1.1.0, when it should be saying Chocolatey GUI version 1.1.0 for business. So the inclusion of the business in the output on the Chocolatey CLI is mimicked in Chocolatey GUI. So what this tells me is that the Chocolatey GUI license extension hasn't been loaded properly. And that is a bug, and we fixed that bug. The reason that this came up is that as part of the uplift in the newer versions of the Chocolatey GUI CLI, we changed the way that we load what we refer to as our extension packages, and that inadvertently broke the Chocolatey GUI license extension. So what I can do, if I upgrade Chocolatey GUI, so I'm just going to do Choco upgrade Chocolatey GUI. If I upgrade to the latest version, which is 1.1.0, that bug will now be fixed. So I'm going to show that in action. And the reason I wanted to show that in action is just to show that, if nothing else, to myself, that it's now working. And I'll explain what's going on here in a second. So don't worry about that output. That's to come. Don't worry about that. That's a known issue. But what is happening now is it's obviously downloading the 111 package from CCR. It's going to install it onto my machine. And at that point, if I run Chocolatey GUI again, so I'm just going to try and type Chocolatey GUI. So two things should happen here. One is that it should say Chocolatey GUI 111 for business in the bottom left-hand corner. And the look and feel of Chocolatey GUI should change slightly. And that's because I've enabled one of the features, the business features of Chocolatey GUI, which is to not use the this PC source. So previously, this said this PC, and it was showing all of the locally installed packages. Now what it's saying is that source isn't available, and that's because that's one of the settings that I've enabled. And that setting only becomes available when the Chocolatey GUI license extension is installed, and that setting is set on. So if I go and have a look over in my settings page, I'm looking here for this, then again, that source, that hide this PC source is enabled. If I put it off again, that setting I don't think takes until you do a restart of Chocolatey GUI. So we'll maybe just do that while we're here. So if I close down Chocolatey GUI and load it up again, this time this PC source will be available because I've disabled that source, but the Chocolatey GUI license extension is still installed and functioning as it was before. So if you were having issues with that, that has now been addressed. So get yourself upgraded to the 111 version, and you should have that working again. The other slight bug that I wanted to mention, and is mentioned in the release notes, is that the cached file, which is listing the outdated packages, is not updated when there are no changes. What does this mean? So there's more details in the issue there, but I'll just talk through what that was. So one of the things that Chocolatey GUI does when it first loads up is it highlights all of the packages that are currently outdated on the machine. So it's the same output that you would get from Choco outdated. But what Chocolatey GUI does is it caches that information into a file. So it does. So every time you load Chocolatey GUI, it doesn't have to go off and do the Choco update each and every time. It keeps it around in a file for a determinable period of time. You can control that through the settings. But what we found was happening was that it would write the file, but if that cache duration expires and it goes off and it fetches Choco outdated again, if there's no change in the file, i.e. the list of outdated packages is exactly the same, when it goes to try and write the file, it tries to be clever and says that the file that it's trying to write is the same that the one that is already there, so it's not going to overwrite it. The problem with that, though, is, well, we determine the cache duration based on the file date stamp applied to the file. So because the file wasn't getting updated, the cache duration was deemed to still be expired. So the next time you open up Chocolatey GUI, it would do a Choco outdated when it didn't need to do it. So that's been fixed as well. That's a harder one to explain in a demo, so I'm not going to attempt that. But that's where we are. That's been fixed as well. So that's now been addressed in the 111 release of Chocolatey GUI. That's all I've got, because that was the two minor bugs that went into Chocolatey GUI. So if there's any questions on that, now would be the time, Paul, if you've got any questions. Otherwise, I will flip over to start talking about Chocolatey CLI.
No, there's no questions in the chat, but before you, well, not before you flip over, but something I picked up that you'd said earlier was, we've been working on this for some time. We actually started working on this in October. It doesn't feel like that, or maybe it does, but this is several months worth of work that we're going to talk about for the alpha of Chocolatey CLI and the other alpha versions that will be coming later for that update for Nougat v3 and the .NET 4.8, not the Nougat v3 implementation and the uplift to .NET 4.8. So yeah, I wanted to just let you know it's been since October.
Yeah. Okay, so there's no questions. What I'll do before we start jumping into showing a demo, I'll maybe just go through some of the release notes that we have here, including the big yellow warnings, just in case they're not clear. So if you are reading the release notes, the first one there is to just reiterate again what Paul has said. This is a pre-release version. It's not suitable for production use. There will be bugs, and you need to ensure that you've done any due diligence on your environment before you install that application. So it's just, again, it's a standard part for the course with an alpha and a beta of our software. We try our best to make sure that it's as usable as possible, but there will be issues and you are going to run into them. So please don't do it on your primary machine. It's just makes sense. Okay. The other warning there is this is a pre-release version of Chocolatey, and it doesn't work with the currently released version of Chocolatey license extension. So what I'm going to show once I get it installed, as I mentioned here, if I clear this out, if I run Choco again, then into that running process that is Choco.exe, the Chocolatey license extension has been loaded, and it's informing me that I've got a business license. So once I get things installed, it will show me that the Chocolatey license extension is no longer being loaded. We're physically saying we're not going to load that license extension if I've got the pre-release version of Chocolatey CLI running. We're trying to make sure that we protect users who have chosen to upgrade to Chocolatey pre-release, but also have the license extension installed. Those two don't play together at the minute with the released versions. That will come when we ship a version of the license extension with the other Chocolatey components at a later point in time. So that's that one. The final note is the one I've already spoken about, which is if you do find any issues, there is a GitHub discussion that we would encourage you to post any comments, concerns, anything into there so that we can keep them all into one place. Okay. The next thing I wanted to address is the list of breaking changes. So there's two main breaking changes. The first one is the biggest one. So in this version of Chocolatey, the alpha, and going forward, we're going to take a requirement on a minimum version of the .NET framework, which is version 4.8. Now, prior to this release, the only thing that you needed on the machine for Chocolatey to run was .NET Framework 4.0 and above. So we are opting in, and we're now saying that we want as a minimum .NET Framework 4.8. I don't remember off the top of my head, maybe someone in the chat can confirm, but .NET Framework 4.0 has been around for a long time now, right? Now, we've done our level best to continue to have support for that older framework, but we've reached the point where certain things it's just not possible. So we're taking this opportunity to, at the same time that we are bringing in support for NuGet v3 feeds, we're also upgrading to use .NET Framework 4.8 as a minimum. So when you install Chocolatey, it will ensure now that the .NET Framework 4.8 is available. Now, the only slight issue there is that typically the installation of the .NET Framework 4.8 requires a reboot of the machine that it's being installed onto. So the installation script for Chocolatey has been modified slightly. So it will allow the installation of .NET Framework 4.8 and then for a reboot. Now that's a manual reboot. The install script is not going to do that for you. After the manual reboot, you'll then be able to install Chocolatey, and because the requirements are then satisfied. The other breaking change that I've mentioned here, and this change really comes because of the uplift to the newest NuGet client libraries, is that we're going to prevent the usage of a leading zero on a package version. So the prime example of that would be something like the 7-zip package, I believe. So if I go and look on the community feed for...
While you're doing that, Gary, I was just going to confirm when .NET 4.0 was released. I just looked it up. It was the 12th of April, 2010.
2010, right. So I think it's fair to say that we've done our level best for 13 years to continue support for that. And we're at a point now where we're saying enough is enough, and we're upgrading to .NET Framework 4.8. And again, that's one of the reasons that this is a breaking change, so that we can make that clear. We can announce that via the version numbers that this is a breaking change. So the one that I wanted to show here was, I think it's, I want to say it's 60. Yeah. So in previous versions of 7-zip, the 7-zip version number was something like 16.04. Now, from a pure semantic version point of view, 16.04 is not a semantic version number. NuGet client libraries by default now support semantic version numbers. So if and when you attempt to pack a package that's got 1604, Chocolatey will now say, well, that's going to be 16.4, not 16.04. Now, this can be a big, long discussion. If you look in the issues on NuGet, when they adopted this new versioning number scheme, it was a huge discussion, lots of backwards and forwards. So the conversation has been had lots and lots and lots, but we're opting to follow the same precedents that NuGet has followed now in terms of the version numbers being stamped onto the package. If anyone's got any questions about that, let's take it offline via the discussions or Discord server if you want to chat about it in there. But we're regarding that as a breaking change simply because it's a change to how the ChocoPack command interprets and uses version numbers compared to what it was before. Okay. The other ones I wanted to mention, the bug on Linux it was already in the develop branch, and that was to do with the ChocoPack command failing on Linux when the version number is greater than 2 gigabytes. Again, anyone that's watched some live streams before, excuse me, any bugs that are related to Chocolatey running on Linux, that comes from the Cake is a Lie. They are the ones who are finding all the bugs and fixing all the bugs on Linux. So again, credit to the Cake is a Lie for the continued work in that area. Thank you very much. The 2 enhancements, I've kind of touched on these already, but these are just spelling them out. In this release of the alpha, we are upgrading to the new or the latest NuGet client libraries, and that at the minute is 6.4.0. So those are the versions that we're pulling in. So anything that's been anything that's available in those assemblies will now be available in Chocolatey. Now, that's not to say that we will be providing all of the functionality that NuGet.exe provides. What that does mean is that if we choose to, we can bring some of that functionality into Chocolatey. But that's not the purpose of this release. The purpose of this release is really to get to a stable point where we still have all the existing Chocolatey functionality, but we're using the newest NuGet client libraries rather than the older ones. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And the final enhancement there is for support. I kind of touched on this already, but we will be supporting semantic version numbers at version 2. So in the previous release of the NuGet core libraries that Chocolatey made use of, we didn't have full support for semantic version v2. It was really just 4-part version numbers, which is the default version number strategy that came from Microsoft. And we had limited support for some semantic versioning at earlier versions. But this one has full support for version 2, so Semver v2. So if you want to and you choose to, you can have a much more, I'm going to say complicated, but it's not when you look at it. But the range of version numbers that you can have, depending on how you version your artifact, is much more vast within semantic version v2. So that comes along for free, essentially, because we have uplifted to the 6.4.0 version of the NuGet client libraries. Okay. So with all of that being said, I'm going to switch over to a demo, unless there's any questions. I did see some things flowing past in the chat, but I've not been reading them. Was there anything I need to pick up on, Paul?
No, there's no specific questions that you're free to answer, Gary. Okay, so let's do a demo. So as I mentioned before, I've got the current latest version, the latest release version of Chocolatey installed, which is 1.2.1. So if I just attempt to do a Choco upgrade, can't even spell Chocolatey. I still can't spell Chocolatey. Let's try that again. Right. If I attempt to do an upgrade of Chocolatey, it'll tell me that there isn't any newer version available. And that's absolutely correct, because the latest version is a pre-release version. It's something you have to opt into. You have to knowingly say, I want to do this thing, okay? So the way that you do that is by either being very explicit about the version number that you want to install, or by using the --pre option on the install command or the upgrade command, okay?
So that's what I'm going to do, but I'm also going to talk about quickly what this thing is, right? So this thing here is my personal NuGet v3 feed on feeds.io. Now, Chocolatey version 1.2.1 doesn't know how to interpret a v3 feed. So that's why I'm getting these warnings. And that's why you saw the warnings earlier when I tried to do one of the other commands that I was doing. So if I try and be a little bit more explicit and say, I want to search that source, and I called my feed is called feeds because I'm clever like that, it's going to say it can't connect to it. Okay. And that's because, again, that's a NuGet v3 feed, and this version of Chocolatey doesn't understand it. So what I'm hopefully going to show, assuming everything goes well, is I'm going to upgrade to the latest version of Chocolatey, and I'm going to be able to then connect to that feed and start searching for packages from that feed, and maybe, touch wood, we'll attempt to do some installs from that feed as well. That's where I'm hoping to get to with the demo. So let's jump in. So the command that I ran before was choco upgrade Chocolatey. So if I then add the -- pre option onto there, that will then find that there is a newer version, which is the 2.0.0-alpha. Paul referred to it as the number 1 alpha, and it was, but from an explicit point of view, that's the date that the alpha was shipped. So what's going to happen here is the standard Chocolatey operation. There's no different, nothing different is happening here other than I explicitly said I want to install the pre-release version. Now, what will happen during the installation is that it will check to see if .NET Framework 4.8 is installed on this machine. And if it's not, it will attempt to install it. Now, because I already had Chocolatey GUI installed, which already had a dependency on .NET Framework 4.8, my machine already had that. So there was nothing for the installer to do other than do the installation of the package itself. Okay, but if you don't have .NET Framework 4.8 installed, the installer will attempt to do that for you. Okay, so having done that, if I now run Choco, this is where we should start seeing a little bit of extra information coming out. And what it's saying is loading the Chocolatey license extension is disabled in this pre-release version of Chocolatey. So it's still saying that it's the business license, but that's really just because I have a business license still installed on my machine. The license hasn't been removed. The license is still exactly where it was before. But we've said we're no longer going to load in the Chocolatey license extension. So before, I would have been able to do something like the Choco download Bob, right? I couldn't think of a package name for a second. Bob it is, right? Because I don't have the Chocolatey license extension installed, the download command is only made available when the Chocolatey license extension is in play. So the Choco download command no longer exists. So this is really just proof that we are using the open source version of Chocolatey and not the license version. So again, I want to reiterate this point because it's important. If you choose to install the pre-release version of Chocolatey on a semi-production machine that has the Chocolatey license extension installed, that Chocolatey license extension functionality is not going to work with this version of the pre-release of Chocolatey CLI. Okay, in future versions, it will, but this one, like I say, we physically stop the loading of the extension where we. Okay, that's just how it works. There's no other magic. There's no other clever stuff happening there. We've written code that physically takes it out, and we're going to put it back in again. Okay. So the command that I ran before was choco search -- source feeds, and that failed before because Chocolatey CLI 1.2.1 doesn't understand how to interpret that v3 feed. So now, if I run this, it should work. Now, the reason I'm saying that it should work is because this is the first time I've done it on this machine, because reasons. I'll refer back to those technical reasons that Paul was talking about earlier, but it's fine, right? So you run feeds, and what it's going to do is it's going to go off to that feed, and it's going to come back with the packages that are available from that feed. So this is my personal feed. So all I've done is I've taken the top 2 packages from community.chocolatey.org, and I downloaded it, and then I pushed them up to that feed. And so what this is telling me is that there are exactly two packages available on that feed. One is Adobe Reader and one is Google Chrome, right? And that's exactly what I expect. And for that part, I'm going to ask you to trust me, because that's worked. I'm actually quite happy that worked, right? Because again, first time on this machine, it's all good, right? So if we now do Chocolate local only.
When you say this machine, Gary, clearly you've tried it on another machine and it works fine.
Absolutely, yes. But the demo gods, the demo gods have got a history of just messing with me, Paul. So while I say I had tested it on this machine, I had literally done it on my own developer VM that was my backup strategy for this demo, should it have not gone the way I wanted it to. But it's gone quite well, so I'm happy, right? So moving on, all the other standard functionality of Chocolatey should work as it was before. So Chocolate local only will output the packages that are currently installed on this machine, which is what we expect. But what we should be able to do now, and this is where now we're going off the demo route completely now. I'm now going to attempt to install one of those packages onto this machine via that v3 feed, right? So what we should be able to do is we should be able to do Choco, because I don't have Adobe Reader installed on this machine. So I'm going to attempt to do Choco install Adobe Reader. And I'm going to be specific and say that I want it to use the feeds feed, because if I didn't do that, it would attempt to enumerate all my sources, and one of those would have been the Chocolatey community repository, which is a v2 feed. So that's the thing that we maybe haven't explained in what we've discussed so far. This version of Chocolatey supports both v2 feeds and v3 feeds. So depending on which one you pick, the NuGet client assemblies will then interrogate those feeds and decide which path it needs to go down. Is it a v2 feed? I'll go and do the standard OData queries. Is it a v3 feed? Okay, I'll go and talk JSON and get the JSON information back so I can do do the operation that I've been asked to do. Okay, so I'm going to go and do that, and I'm reasonably hopeful it's going to work. So it's downloading Adobe Reader. It's found the Adobe Reader package. It's found the nutkeg. It's downloaded the nutkeg. At this point, it's telling me that it's downloading the MSP. So it's obviously taken that nutkeg, it's downloaded it, broke it apart, found the chocolate install.ps1 file, executing that chocolate install.ps1 file. And at this point, it's installing the Adobe Acrobat Reader. So again, quite happy that worked. So the reason I was not scared, but there is some known issues around dependencies. And that's one of the known issues that we've listed on the GitHub discussion, that it can get confused with regard to what dependencies are required and available. But what this is showing is that has worked as expected, and it's now installing the package as it would had it been the Chocolatey v2 feed. Okay, so I don't know how long the actual installation of Adobe Acrobat Reader takes. So I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. Any questions?
Just while we wait, Gary, I was going to say that somebody mentioned in the chat that don't run Choco upgrade all -- pre. That's it's particularly on a scheduled task. That's going to cause all sorts of problems, because what you're saying there is, I want to upgrade all my software, then yeah, use the pre-release versions if they're available. That's not going to end well. So again, just to reiterate, pre-release software, alpha versions, not really supposed to be in production. Yeah, so saying upgrade all my software and upgrade it to the latest pre-release versions is not a good idea.
Correct. And from a pure Windows automation standpoint, I think we would all agree that that's probably not the best thing to do anyway. If you're just blindly saying Choco upgrade all to the latest pre-release versions, unless you've done your due diligence and tested all those pre-release versions of those packages in some other machine before doing that, then that's not something we would recommend at all. But yes, I think it's fair to say that in this version of the Chocolatey CLI alpha, if you were to do a Choco upgrade all -- pre, bad things would happen. So don't do it. Okay. And then, so that's obviously finished now. So if I do a Choco list local only, I should get the Adobe Reader package being output as it would normally. But again, it's now doing it via the new get client libraries, and everything is working as expected. That was pretty much the end of my demos that I had, Paul, because at this point, I'm not sure what else to show, if I'm honest.
I think you know, what we really wanted to accomplish today is to talk about a lot of the caveats that we've reiterated over and over again about alpha versions, not installed release software, etc. Talking about the functionality that the alpha has, and also Chocolatey GUI. One thing I'd actually picked up on there is that you're still running Choco list - local only. Whereas in version 2, when we finally release it, we won't need the - local only, because Choco list will only be for the local machine itself. I don't know if you want to touch on that, and maybe to remind people about the deprecations that are coming up in the final release of version 2 of Chocolatey CLI.
Yeah, it's a good point. So let's go over to GitHub again. So if we look at issues here, so all of this is public on the GitHub repository, so anyone can look at this. But we have a milestone, an upcoming milestone, that is the 200 milestone. So currently we have 14 closed issues and 30 open issues. So the intention is that we're going to get through all of those open issues and ship everything that's in here. So a couple of the things that are coming up, or one of the big things that Paul mentioned that's coming up, is that currently, if you do a Choco list, that's the exact same thing as doing a Choco search, and that's the exact same thing as doing a Choco find. So we have aliases for that command. Now, essentially, it's a search operation. Now, historically, when we first started Chocolatey, the Choco list command will do a search against a remote source. So Chocolatey community repository, whatever feeds that you have available. But some of the early feedback that we got from Chocolatey users was that really what their expectation was is that the Choco list command should only list what's installed on the machine, rather than going off and searching. So we're making a breaking change in this breaking change release, the 2.0.0 release, which is going to say Choco list is then going to become the exact same as if you'd run Choco list local only, right? But you won't need to specify the Choco local only option anymore. So Choco list, if I run Choco list there right now, it's going to go off and it's going to enumerate all my sources, and it's going to come back with a list of packages. That's thousands. So I don't really want to do that. But because Choco list local only is under my fingers, that's what I remember. That's how I type it, right? Because I've done it for so long. So although we are removing, or although we are changing the Choco list to be local only by default, what we'll probably end up doing is that this option will just be silently ignored. So it'll still be there and it'll be interpreted, because that means it won't break any scripts that are out there that are already using it and scripted to use it, but it will just be silently ignored at the minute. But expect that in a future breaking change that will completely be removed and it will no longer be interpreted. So just keep that in mind, okay? Some of the other high-level ones that are coming up. This one's bugged me for a while, and Paul knows all about it. But if you do Choco source -h as an example, then you've got the ability to do Choco source add, Choco source remove, Choco source disable, Choco source enable. So we have what we refer to as subcommands for the removal of a source or the addition of a source. But if you look at the Choco API key command, then while we have a subcommand for the well, no, we actually don't have a subcommand for the add either. But if I wanted to remove an API key, what I actually have to do is Choco API key -name, and then I have to give it the option that is, let me find it, it's at the bottom here, then it is -- remove. That, to me, is not intuitive, because while we have a remove subcommand for one thing, we don't have it for another thing. So again, in this breaking change release, we're taking the opportunity to say we're going to remove the -- remove option in favor of a remove subcommand. So we bring consistency to the user interface that is the Chocolatey CLI. Okay, so I'll rattle through the other breaking changes that are here. This one bugs me as well, and it's bugged me for a while, but let me try and explain why it bugs me. If I do Choco source list, then I'll get a list of all the sources that are available on my machine. If I do Choco API key list, I'll get a list of all the API keys. I don't have any that are on my machine. If I do a Choco feature list, I'll get a list of all the features that are enabled on my machine. But if I do a Choco config list, I'm going to get a list of all of the features, all of the API keys. Let me find that again. All the API keys, all the features, all the sources, and then all the configs that I have available. So to me, again, that's not very intuitive. So we're taking this opportunity to bring consistency to the output. So when you do a Choco config list, I'm going to list out just the config values. So again, that's a breaking change, but again, it brings consistency to the output from those commands. So hopefully that makes sense, and the reasoning for it makes sense. But that's one of the other breaking changes going into this release. This one here, disallow passing in a path to a nupkeg file directly when installing or upgrading packages. So what this is referring to is, let's imagine, I don't know if I have one. Excuse me a second, I need to cough a second. Excuse me. I don't know if I have one, but let's imagine that I wanted to do a Choco install of a package called, let's just call it Chocolatey, right? By default, what's going to happen there is that Chocolatey is going to attempt to find a package with that name on all of the sources that you have available. Okay, and that's fine, right? But at the minute, if I were to attempt to do an installation of a package, I'm going off script here a second, Paul, but I'm gonna try and wing it. Bear with me a second, right? So if I were to go and find the Adobe Reader nupkeg and provide a path directly to it, I'm not specifying a source there, I'm providing a path directly to a nupkeg. And if I hit that, if I run that, it's going to tell me actually that the use of a nupkeg on a new spec file for the package name or source is known to cause issues. So this has been a known issue in Chocolatey for a little bit, and we warn about it. And what we suggest instead is, if you do want to install that nupkeg, what you should do is you should install it like this. So you would do Adobe Reader -- source. So you take the part that was the nupkeg, you add it as the name of the package, and then you specify the source to that folder that it lives in. So we're taking that message, or sorry, we're taking this message where we were saying, we know what you're doing. We don't think it's a good idea. Please don't do it. And we're turning that around and saying, you know, you're just not getting to do that at all anymore, right? Hence why it's a breaking change. Okay, so any attempt to use that strategy for both a new spec file directly or to a nupkeg directly, that's now not going to work at all anymore. Okay, so that's that one. Choco list we spoke about, the removing of the -- remove, the remove web PI alternative source. let's have a quick chat about that one. So let's come out of there and let's do this. So I think it's fair to say it's a lesser known feature, but if I were to do Choco install Bob from -- source, say Windows features, now that's not going to work because there isn't a Windows feature called Bob, and that's expected. But what that's actually doing behind the scenes is it's using what Chocolatey refers to as an alternative source. And the alternative source in this regard is the list of available Windows features. So if you were to do, let me see if I can remember how to do this, Choco search -- source Windows features, that will list out all of the available Windows features that can be installed.
You've misspelled source.
I did misspell source. Thank you very much, Paul. Or you're always on the ball, aren't you? Thank you. So what that's going to do is it's going to list out all of the available features that can be installed via that alternative source. Now, the way that we do this using DISM isn't the snap-based one in the world, but what I'm trying to show here is that if I did take the DHCP server feature and pass that into the Choco install with the name DHCP server with -- source Windows features, it would install that Windows feature for me. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, one of the other alternative sources that we have is the web platform installer or WebPI alternative source. Now, we've done some digging, and as far as we can tell, the WebPI ecosystem has been deprecated by Microsoft. It's no longer there. Okay, so as a result, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the WebPI alternative source in this breaking change release of Chocolatey. So you won't be able to do the typical one that most folks or some folks used it for was for doing any additions to IIS, so Internet Information Services. If you needed to install a plugin, for want of a better word, to IIS, you could use the web platform installer to do that. We actually did that, or we recommended that for some of the setup of Chocolatey server. If you're installing that, then you would use the WebPI alternative source to do that. That's going away because as an ecosystem, that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so that's that breaking change. This one, it's been marked as a breaking change, but this is more the internals of Chocolatey, and that's one of the dependency packages that we have. So rather than using the older RX, so that's reactive extensions, NuGet packages, we're switching over to use system.reactive, which are the newer versions of those. That shouldn't cause any end user experience breaking changes, but it is a breaking change to the internals of how we do things. Hence why it's listed as a breaking change. I'll come back to that one in a second because it's a controversial one. This one here, fix a spelling mistake in the extract binary file from assembly function. What does that even mean? Right. In one of the other versions of Chocolatey that we did recently, a kind community contributor basically went through with a tool that they own or that they've created, and they fixed a bunch of spelling mistakes. And one of the spelling mistakes that they found was on a essentially what was a public-facing method. So at the time, we couldn't pull that in because that would be a breaking change because it was a breaking change to a publicly accessible method. It was one of the parameters that was named incorrectly. So we're taking the opportunity in this breaking change to change that. So that's what that is. The other one here is we started this process in the 1.1 version of Chocolatey, I want to say. But effectively what we did is we marked all of the Chocolatey shims as being deprecated. So as an example of that, if I were to do, what would be a good one to try and do? If I were to try and do, right now, if I were to do Choco upgrade, seriously, this is why you don't type when you're trying to talk. If I were to try and do a Choco upgrade Chocolatey, it'll tell me there aren't any packages available, and it'll probably tell me that no, it didn't tell me that I'm smarter than the average bear. That's good. What you can do instead is you could do cut Chocolatey. So it's used as a shorthand for the Choco upgrade command, and that's why we had it originally. But that is being deprecated. And we've marked that as being deprecated on the website. So any documentation refers to the the usage of the shims. It's been deprecated in all of our documentation. It's been something that's been spoken about for a long period of time. So in this release, we're taking the opportunity to take all of those deprecated shims and remove them. So we won't ship them anymore. Now, there has been some discussions about how there may be a community-owned package that might add some of those back in via PowerShell aliases. So if you are, if it's under your fingers and you want those shorthand versions of those commands, you'll probably end up getting those via PowerShell aliases shipped as a Chocolatey package. But that's out with the scope of Chocolatey. That would be a Chocolatey community-driven effort. The removal of deprecated configurations from config. So there's a couple of lingering entries in the chocolatey.config file that have been kept around for historical reasons because they've been moved to other locations within the chocolatey.config file. So in this release, again, we're just saying it's time to remove those so that we can get them all away. I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to quickly rattle through the last ones. That was a reasonably long one, so I'll maybe shelve that one for another day. If anyone wants to know about the change to the removal of the default push source, we can absolutely talk about that. But I will quickly go back and talk about this one, removal of side-by-side installs. This is a reasonably controversial one because some folks really use it. But what we've said is, and we marked this as deprecated in previous versions of Chocolatey 1.x, the whole concept of a side-by-side installation. So what I mean by that is a side-by-side install is when you do, let's say you do Choco install Python, and then you want to do Choco install Python a specific version, then that wouldn't work because you've already got Python installed. But if you really, really wanted to, you could do Choco install Python -- version --SXS, so side-by-side. And what that would do effectively, it would allow you the installation of that package twice, because Python, the underlying Python application, allows you to have two different versions of the application installed at once. So Chocolatey had that functionality, but then when it came to doing a Choco upgrade or a Choco upgrade all, that's when things started to break. Because what one are you upgrading? Are you upgrading the one that was version 3.x, or are you upgrading the one that is version 2.x? And what do you upgrade to? So there was all sorts of reasons why it just didn't work. So in the latest 1.x versions of Chocolatey CLI, we've effectively said that those are being deprecated, and then we're removing the usage of that completely when we go to the 2.x version. There's been lots of discussion around this on some of the community issues and discussions. There are workarounds, and the workaround is to have an explicitly named package for whatever the version you're trying to install. So I used Python earlier. There's already a version of Python that is Python 2.x and Python 3.x. So you can install Python 3.x and you can install Python 2.x. And when you do Choco upgrade all, it'll upgrade both the 3.x package to the latest version, and it'll upgrade the 2.x package to the latest version that's in that stream of that package versions. So Chocolatey as an ecosystem has a way forward in how to deal with this, but there will be a little bit of turbulence, I think, in terms of getting packages that need to be split out into individual package IDs set up and running. But we still feel that this is the best way forward for the entire ecosystem. And I think I'm done. I think that was the main breaking changes. There was another page, but I'll just check. That one we'd already spoken about. So that breaking change was the behavior of Choco list to become local only. So we've already spoken about that. The only one that we haven't spoken about is the longer one regarding the default push location. We should maybe take that as a topic on another discussion. I think just conscious of the time, that's it. But what I will say, just to finish off, I would encourage you to have a play with the alpha. Obviously, we went through it. Don't install it on your production machine, but have a play with it. If you notice anything that's not working the way you expect it to, definitely reach out on the discussion. So there's a pinned comment up here to an issue that links you through to the alpha. Come in here, see what the known issues are. If you find something that's not known issue, definitely add a comment here and we can discuss it further. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gary, for taking us through all of that. I think side-by-side installs are something, as you said, that's controversial, but it's actually taken us to a place we should be going. And speaking to various people from way before the days of us, that side-by-side installs were, I think it was fair to say, not really intended for what they're being used for just now. It was a kind of workaround feature to get a certain functionality, and it kind of grew arms and legs a little bit. And it causes more problems than it solves, certainly for us as the Chocolatey team, but also for people once have installed and who want to manipulate those packages. It seems to be causing issues for them as well, because they're not quite as straightforward as normal packages. Okay, so we're right at time. We will be releasing additional alpha versions of the Chocolatey software, the additional components that Gary mentioned earlier. We'll be releasing them soon, and that moves us further down that road towards Nougat V3 functionality for all of the Chocolatey products, and also uplifting everything to .NET 4.8. That .NET 4 requirement that we had before from when it was released in 2010, I think we've outgrown that. And, I don't think anybody could hold us any further to keeping that particular functionality around. But if you can install the software, as Gary said, provide feedback in that discussion, we really, really appreciate that. That helps us to drive it. We can only test so much. We can only test for what we know people use it for. When we've got extensive tests and we're, manual and automated tests, it's when you release it to the public who do strange things that we never thought of. That's when we really find out the things that are broken and that don't work in the way that people expect. So that is actually invaluable to us. Gary, thank you very much for the demos today and for demonstrating Chocolatey CLI and Chocolatey GUI. I know you did sound a little bit like you were winging it there, but of course you never do winging it. Being a professional.
I went through those demos extensively, repeatedly, on multiple machines prior to this step. Yes, I did. Honest.
Yeah. So as I said, you would never wing this anyway. So
no,
that would be silly and incorrect if I said that. But do you want to say anything else before we wrap up, Gary?
There was one other thing I was just thinking about, and it's come and gone out of my head. No, it was just so. Paul mentioned earlier that we've been working on this since October. A big part of that has been us getting familiar with the NuGet client code base, bringing all the things up to date, etc. But a lot of that has been extending and shoring up our testing infrastructure to get to the point where we can be much happier about the new version working in the same way as the old version did. Because the last thing that we want to do is ship this new version and inadvertently break someone. So a lot of the testing that we've been adding, both manual testing, as you mentioned, automated testing, unit testing, end-to-end testing, all of that has been a big part of this work to try and get to a point to know that we haven't broken something. And it's through that testing that as we've been doing things, we've found some gotchas that would have broken something. So the testing that we put in play has already paid for itself, in all honesty. But it's now that we have that's just something we can build up on top of as we move forward with the next breaking change of Chocolatey or the next feature releases that we put out. So we're in a very good position in terms of the testing infrastructure that we now have in place. So it's been great to see all that come together from the team as well. So yeah, really happy about that.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working on this for over 3 months now, and a lot of the work at the beginning of that 3-month period was ensuring that our testing infrastructure and the tests that we have were robust enough that we could confidently say when we have the Nougat V3 implementation that functionality is like for like. So there's a lot of effort and a lot of time went into doing that. So just to say thank you to everybody for watching us today. We really appreciate that. This is why we do these, is to give you that information and to hopefully you enjoy those live streams on Twitch and on YouTube. But please follow us on Twitch and subscribe with the bell on YouTube, and you'll get notifications when we next stream. Make sure as well you like or dislike the videos on YouTube so that we know what content you all want to see. There's no point in us putting content out there if it's not things that you actually want to see or care about. You can find all the ways to follow us at the bottom of our homepage, as I said at the beginning, or in the description of this Twitch stream or YouTube video, whichever platform you're watching it on. Our next community coffee break is on the 16th of February at 5 p.m. UTC. That's where we look at all things Chocolatey community. And the next product spotlight stream is on the 2nd of March at 5 p.m. UTC as well. Watch out for announcements for both of those in Discord and all the social media places that I talked about. So we hope to see you then. So take care, everybody. Thank you for watching us, and we will see you on the next stream. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.